Anyone ever seen the movie Final Destination? One person, two. Right. Well, I'm going to be in the next one, I think, because that's kind of like my life journey so far. But, it has got some humor in it, some sad bits. So obviously, like Steve said earlier on, if there's anything that's going to stir a bit of a nerve, then please feel free to leave the room. But it does end with hope. And that's what I kind of want to talk to you about today. So let me go back to my teens, I guess. I mean, I was brought up by my parents to have values that you were only successful if you were the best at everything. If you had the most successful job, you got straight A's in your GCSEs, your A levels, you've got your, like Tanya said earlier on, the first in your degree. And then you went on and got the best job, had the best house, the best car. And I remember one of the things my dad saying to me, actually, when I was 17 and going for my driving test. And he reminded me as I was walking out of the door that morning and said, just remember, you cannot fail your driving test because no one in our family has ever failed their driving test before. And I remember when I did my test, I did pass it. And I thought, oh, thank God, I've passed my driving test. But actually, did it really matter? And that pressure at that age, it had always been there. And during my teens, I swam for Wales. I swam for my country, and I did qualify for the Commonwealth Games, but couldn't go because I had a knee injury and had to have surgery. So my story is actually called Broken to Bionic, and it will become clear. So the first surgery I had was in my knee, and I've got some metal in my knee. And I remember my parents both saying when I couldn't go to the Commonwealth Games, oh, good, you can concentrate on your studies now. And that was really tough because my whole life was swimming. From the age of 8 or 9, I was in the pool twice a day, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. And I was kind of the weird kid at school because all my friends at school just go out with their friends after school, and I was going swimming. And I did some great things, don't get me wrong. I traveled abroad and I felt like I was doing something really good for myself. And then when that ended and came to an abrupt end, and I had to go and really focus on my education. I mean, I failed most of my GCSEs first time round, resat them in a year, got them all, and then went on and did my A levels in a year, got all them, and then it was kind of mapped out for me that I was going to have to study law or medicine because all my family were lawyers. And those are the two degrees that meant that you were going to be successful. So I went to university and studied law, and I struggled with it. I got a 2-2, which is classed as the drinker's degree, I believe. Not that I really went out much. And I worked my way up in my career in my 20s. In fact, when I was in my early 20s, when I was 22, I had a mini stroke. And for years, they were trying to find out what had caused that to happen. And after quite a long time, so not for another 10 years, we established it was due to me having a hole in my heart, which I was born with because I was born very prematurely. And then I had heart surgery at the age of 32, and I've now got a metal device in my heart as well. So that's the second bit of metal where the bionic woman comes from. And I was also told up to that point that I wouldn't be able to have children. So I'd kind of thrown myself into my career as a lawyer in my 20s and early 30s, just thinking, right, this is it. I got married quite young, and that marriage didn't work out. And I was going to say the word unfortunately at the end then, but no, I'm not going to use that word. It was a good thing. And I'd moved from South Wales over to Bristol, which is where I live just outside of Bristol now in a beautiful little place called Portishead. And then when I fell pregnant, I guess my priorities around work changed. I didn't want to be that mum who was never at the school gates and, not having the normal chat with other mums. And I would work probably most days 9 till 6 o'clock, 9 till 7. And it wasn't until my daughter was a few years old that, and she was going to school, that I put in a request to work flexible working hours. And that was granted. And it meant that I could have a Wednesday off, because I wanted to have a one clear day where I always knew I was going to be there, and I could just carry on with things like housework for the rest of the Wednesday, meet up with a friend for a coffee, and that was good until we got a change of management in the company where I worked. And that's when things really, really started to change for me. My new line manager, his values, again, I guess, kind of quite similar to my dad's in a way. That I didn't get any special treatment because I was a woman and because I was a mum, and I still had to have the same targets as the full-timers. And I thrive on a bit of stress. I think most people thrive on a bit of stress, but it's when that stress gets to a point where it's up here all the time. And I'd come into work on a Thursday morning after having the Wednesday off, and literally every single one of my files would be piled right up high. I'd come into about 80, 90 emails, similar number of pieces of post. We weren't allowed to do any work from home, so it was just all waiting for me. And I was expected to take on more work as well to reach my targets. And I found myself on Thursdays coming into work by 6:30 in the morning, and I had an hour to travel as well. So I hardly got to see my daughter. Well, I didn't. I'd just see her in the bedroom when she was still sleeping. And then I would literally come into work and, fueled myself on coffee after coffee after coffee, and the vending machine with unhealthy snack bars. And even though I'd always been into my fitness and my health, all that just went out the window over quite a short period of time. And, the only exercise I would get every day is walking up the 4 flights of steps to my desk, which at least I didn't get the lift, I guess. But, that was my only exercise every day. And I could be reading a document and, I'd read the same line 50 times and I would not be able to tell you what it said on that line. And that's kind of what my day was like every day. And I remember getting this horrible feeling one day of panic, and my breathing was going all over the place. And, really hard to try and explain this, but it was almost like, when you're in a swimming pool and you can hear people speaking above, but it's all really, faded. I felt like that. I felt like I could hear kind of voices, but they weren't really there, and I wasn't listening. Couldn't breathe properly. Was that a panic attack? I didn't know, but I didn't tell anyone, and I'd plow on and I'd crack on. I'd work until 10, 11 o'clock at night most nights, get home. I'd be sick when I get home because I was so stressed, and I'd be crying. I'd be sick again in the morning. And I started shutting everybody out. I pushed my husband away, pushed my friends away. My family didn't get it at all. I used to have these, what I call attacks, where I would lose the feeling in my hands and my feet, and my hands would literally claw in on me like a claw shape. And it would start off like a really bad crushing feeling, which was very painful. And then it would just go completely numb. And sometimes I wouldn't get that feeling back in my hands for half an hour. Other days, at the worst, it was 3 days. And I'd have to just lie down. I just have to go to sleep. But there was no time to go to sleep. I had to be a mum. I had to be a wife. I had to be the good lawyer. And I didn't know what to do. I was just really, really struggling. And I didn't talk to anyone about it because I just didn't understand it myself. And then in 2013, things were getting really bad, and I made a mistake at work. How dare I make a mistake? I sent an email to the wrong person. And there was nothing confidential attached to this particular email. It was a client I'd been working with for about 9 months, and he wouldn't answer his phone from our work numbers because it came up as withheld. But he said, if you send me an email, then I'll phone you straight away because I'll see it come through on my iPhone. So I did that, but I missed a digit out of the email address. And I got an email. I got an email back from the wrong Steve. Hi. If you're blonde, 25, and sexy as, I won't say the word, please feel free to respond. So at first I thought that was quite funny. And then I was like, oh no, I've breached data protection, and I worked for a really big corporate company, and thought I'd better let my line manager know, because it's probably going to end up going through to IT and all that. And he said, okay, thanks for being honest. And then the next day I come in to work after being there for 14 years, and having being quite senior in the team, to a letter telling me not to turn the computer on, not to talk to anyone, not to touch anything. Literally frog marched out the building and told that I was being suspended for at least a week while they carried out an investigation. And it got somebody external came in and carried out the investigation, and decided that I hadn't been negligent, although I also got reported to my professional body, who then also carried out their own investigation. And it was so stressful, because this was my career. I'd spent years building up to this, and I thought, what else could I do? I'm a failure. I'm useless. And I remember in my disciplinary hearing, my line manager saying to me, look, you haven't lost your job yet, but we are going to give you a final written warning, because, you need to remember that we're not humans, we're robots, and we can't make mistakes. And I believed that for a long time. I mean, technically I am partly robot. I haven't finished with the metal bits yet. But, actually, no, I feel sorry for him now, if those are his values, if that's how he lives his life, because we do make mistakes, and it's how you learn from those mistakes that is really important. And that pressure was really hard. And then from that day on, the panic attacks were daily. And I ended up collapsing one day. My whole left side of my body collapsed on me. I was blue lighted to hospital. My blood gases were checked. I hadn't had a heart attack. MRI scan, I hadn't had a stroke. Anyone ever had nerve conduction tests done in this room? Oh, you know what it's like. Torture, right? If you ever want to get any truth out of anyone, give them nerve conduction tests. Oh my God, it was the most awful thing ever. They literally put these like electric things into your fingers with a big needle and then set it alight. And it's like, oh God. I had that done. And every time so many blood tests and other scans, all the test results would come back negative. We've got good news, Mrs. Hirons. You're fine. And I'm like, actually, I'm not fine. I know there's something wrong with me. And I went to my GP one day and just tried to explain how I was feeling, how these panic attacks were just daily, and I had no confidence. My self-esteem was on the floor. I was crying all the time. I wasn't seeing any friends. I'd lost my friends, because there's only so many times that, you can be asked to go out for a drink, and then you turn them down and you say you've got a headache, which was probably true. And I felt really lonely. The GP, having only got 10 minutes with him, and I know this isn't the same for all GPs, I know. But he just looked at me and he said, well, you need antidepressants, and, you need to pull yourself together. And I left there and I sat in the car thinking, no one's taking me seriously. I'm being made to feel like I'm just a waste of time. I'm stupid. So I walked out with that job. I just left after 14 years, and I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I had to start trying to find me again. Who was I? And the only way I was going to do that was leave. And it didn't matter that I was leaving a well-paid job to, take a huge drop in salary. I started to find myself again. I started finding my love for fitness again. At the age of nearly 40, I trained as a spin instructor and personal trainer, and loved it. And that really helped with my confidence, getting back on that bike at the front of the studio, on a stage, funnily enough. I don't like the stage. Not this one's okay. Not when you're on a bike looking over the bars thinking, oh God, I'm going to fall on somebody in a minute. And that really helped. And then I did another job for a couple of years, local to where I lived. It was nice. I was home by 5 o'clock every night. But I still hadn't really worked out what had caused me to burn out, to kind of break down, really. I just had changed a few things in my lifestyle. And then towards the end of 2015, I got approached by another big corporate company back in Bristol where I'd worked, and they asked me to come and work for them because they'd heard stuff about my legal background, which again, I was a bit of like imposter syndrome going on. But I went to the interview, and every time I drove anywhere near the centre of Bristol, I would end up having one of these panic attacks, and my breathing would go. I'd be crying. I couldn't control it. And I thought, I've got to deal with this. And I drove into Bristol, mounted the curb, nearly knocked over 2 pedestrians. And I pulled over in the car and rang my husband and said, like, I can't go to the interview. I can't do it. And he said, look, do what you need to do. If you can't do it, don't do it. And I was really early. I was about 45 minutes early for the interview. So somehow, I put some really good music on in the car. And that has always been my thing. Put on a really, really good song, sing your heart out. Not that I felt like singing that day, but it was some of the words in the songs which really, really helped. And I did go to the interview. And I think I wasn't worried whether I got the job or not by that point. And they did offer it to me. And I thought about it for a while, and I decided, no, it's not right. It's not the right time. I can't, I'm not ready for this yet. And do I want to go back into that high stressful type of environment? So I turned it down. And then about 3 months later, they approached me again and said, we loved you at the interview. Will you please come and work for us? And I thought, you don't get this kind of opportunity twice. So I was honest with them, and I'd explained what had happened when I worked in my previous role, and that if I was going to do anything like this, it'd have to be flexible working. And they were fine. They were absolutely brilliant. So I took the job. And the first few months were great. I won Employee of the Quarter award, and I started to think, well, I am a good lawyer. I'm not a bad lawyer after all. And then things started to change again. We lost a couple of members of staff. And I was one of the only lawyers qualified in certain areas of law. So it was like, well, we're going to need you to stay on. Can you work a bit longer? And it was creeping back up to the sort of 14-hour days again, 50, 60 hours a week. And I was tired, and I was starting to get the panic attacks again, and the tingling feelings in my feet, and my fingers were coming back again. And, my husband and I, we were arguing a lot, and it was just all of those signs coming back in, but I hadn't really spotted it. And my way of dealing with my stress of getting into the centre of Bristol was I would cycle to work every day. So I would either, if I had enough time, I'd cycle all the way from Portishead, which was about 12 miles, or I'd get my fold-up bike out of Brompton, and I'd put that in my car, go back halfway and cycle the rest of the way. And that was great for my mental health, because that bit of exercise in the morning, owning my morning, which was really important. I'd always been a nightmare in the mornings. That really helped. Apart from on one day in January 2017, and I hit a wet patch on the road and lost control of my bike, went over the handlebars, not seriously injured, thankfully. I did crack my helmet all the way through, so thankfully, always wear a helmet on a bike. But I had a really awful hematoma to my leg, and I've not brought any pictures of that, but my whole leg was black. So I couldn't walk for about 2 or 3 weeks and had to take some time off. And I felt really, really guilty for being off. I'd only been with the company about 9 months. And then when I felt fine, I carried on teaching spin, but just one-legged because I'm a bit crazy. And I went back to work, and I remember looking out the window on the morning of the 21st of February, 2017. I thought, it's all right. I can cycle today. It's not wet. It'd been wet, but it wasn't raining, because I decided I wasn't going to cycle if it was raining again. So I got to the road where I'd had my previous accident. I actually remember checking my helmet because I got a new one. And I don't remember anything more apart from about half an hour later, waking up in an ambulance. And I remember thinking, first of all, what the hell have I done? I really hurt my finger. My finger on my right hand really hurt. And I could feel there was some blood on my face, but there wasn't a huge amount of pain. So I was in and out of consciousness, and apparently the paramedics were asking me questions like what my name was, and I gave them my maiden name. And I couldn't remember my date of birth, but I could remember my daughter's, and little things like that. So I clearly had a head injury. And then when I got to hospital, I discovered that I'd had an accident in exactly the same place as I had a month earlier, 3 weeks earlier. I mean, who the hell does that? I mean, I didn't even admit about the first accident for ages because I thought, how embarrassing is that? And when I had numerous scans in and out of consciousness in the hospital, and the consultant came out. And by this point, my husband had arrived, and the look on his face said it all. And I said, I want to have a mirror. And he was like, no. So I demanded a mirror, and I literally had a hole here above my eyebrow. My face, it wasn't me. I didn't look like me. And the consultant came out and said, we've got good news and bad news. The good news is you haven't broken your finger. But the bad news is that you've broken all of the bones around your orbital area. You've completely smashed your cheekbone. You've broken your jaw. You've fractured the base of your skull. And we're going to have to wait for a lot of the swelling to go down and perform major facial reconstructive surgery on you. So this is where the other bit of metal comes in. The whole of my left side of my face has been rebuilt, has got metal titanium plates in. I'm actually 93. Like that one. I've had people in an audience before that look at me and go, oh, wow. Yeah, no, I'm not really. And that was really tough. So for the next 6 months, I was unable to do pretty much anything at all. I could hardly leave the house. I guess that was my version of lockdown because, I couldn't even go for a walk to the end of the road without being sick, or, I had tubes sticking out my head. My daughter wasn't allowed to see me quite a lot because she was only 8 and it was too scary for her. And cutting a long story short, the next few months was really hard. I pushed my husband away even more. He met someone else and, he left for a while. Good news is we are back together and everything's happier. We're better now than I think we ever have been. I taught myself how to play the guitar on YouTube because I couldn't do anything else, which was great. And I wouldn't have done that, had I not had my accident. But it was more about trying to go back to work. And when I tried to go back to work, there was something still not right. I was left deaf in my left ear for about a year after the accident, and I'd lost quite a bit of my sight in my left eye. And I had to have a lot more surgery over the next sort of 14 months or so. And I would start forgetting things. I'd be halfway through a conversation with a client and I'd forget what I was talking about. And I'd forget my way into work. And I didn't know if this was to do with my head injury or something else. And eventually my line manager said, look, this is a problem. We need to get to the bottom of this and you need to do better. And I didn't know how long it was going to take. And eventually I was diagnosed with episodic depression as a result of the accident and the stress I was under at work. And my line manager called me into a room and said, we're really concerned now about this additional diagnosis of mental health. So we're either going to put you on a performance improvement plan for a month, and if you're not better, then you'll have to have disciplinary action. Or you can go on an unpaid sabbatical until you're better, or you can leave. And I decided to get myself signed off with work-related stress just while I got myself together. But this was now a point in my life where I thought, God, there's only so many times you can, hear the same record until you get bored. And I thought, it's like history repeating itself. Is it my fault? Is it me? I pushed my husband away. I wasn't present much for my daughter anymore. I just felt like a complete failure. And I tried talking to my family as well, my parents, about leaving my legal career and maybe even losing this job. My dad's response was, we've all had bad days in the office, but you don't just quit. And I thought, oh, God, how am I going to live up to this? What am I going to do? And one night I took a whole packet of my tramadol tablets, which I was on for my pain. Drank far too much alcohol, which I shouldn't have been drinking. And I just went and sat on a local beach near where I live. And all I can explain was I felt numb. I can't even remember feeling cold. The tide washed over me. I just knew that the world was a better place without me in it, that my daughter would be better off living with her dad, not me. I had nothing. I had no money. I was having to rely on food banks just to eat. And I thought, I was I was 45. How the hell could I have got to that age with, and ending up like this? Um, if it wasn't for the Coast Guard coming out and rescuing me that night, I wouldn't be stood here today. And it was the next morning that I had that epiphany moment and knew that I had to get up and not give up. Because my daughter came and she emptied her money box in front of me. And there was £1.22 in it. And she said, "Mummy, I'd rather have my mummy than money." And I phoned my local Mind charity. And I remember speaking to the lady on the phone who just listened to me for the first time. For the first time, I was properly able to talk and let my everything out about everything that had happened to me over a few years. And, she told me to go on a journey of self-discovery. And I didn't know what that was at first, but my consultant had said to me, there's certain things you're never going to do again with your injuries. You'll never be able to, compete in events. And we had a skiing trip booked for a few months later. And he said, you're not going to be able to fly because the altitude will kill you. So we got the train instead. And I dealt with the altitude of going up the ski lifts with getting off at each level and waiting for the pressure to normalize. My next big challenge was then about a year and a half after my accidents, because I couldn't get back on a bike. So I had to do something to get myself back on a bike. So I just entered a half Ironman event and then did that. And I did 2 this year as well. And just that feeling when you accomplish something which you're told you're never going to do again is amazing. So now when someone tells me that, I can't do something, I bloody well go and do it. And we've heard this throughout today that, if you start believing in yourself, amazing things do start to happen. And I have quit my legal career. And my dad doesn't talk to me anymore. And to be quite frank, I don't care, because that's up to him. I'm proud of what I'm doing. And I know I'm building a really good role model situation for my daughter, who's now 13. And I run my own business. I now work with people, helping them to avoid and recover burnout, bring my programs through corporate companies. And I'm just me. I'm nothing special. I am just me. But I am kind of slightly bionic. And I just want to kind of leave you on these couple of slides we've got here. Falling down is an accident. Staying down is a choice. You know what? You can either give up or you can get up. I lived in victim mode for so long. And not anymore. I am not a victim at all. That's me, by the way, doing a really crazy challenge, which was a bit like World's Strongest Man meets Ninja Warrior, about a year after my accident. I believe failure is success in disguise. I hate the word failure, but sometimes you've all got to go through those bad things to come out the other side and then succeed. It's not about having the huge paycheck, although something does help to pay the bills. Mindset. My business is called Mindset in Motion. Once I started working on my mindset and accepting that I could make mistakes and that didn't make me a failure or a bad person. Living in the moment, not worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month, the overwhelm that I used to suffer with, that's all gone. I focus my energy on the things I can control, not the things I can't control. And I would advise everyone to be in that, as we're going through this, these tough times over the last couple of years. Always be kind to yourself. Self-care isn't selfish. Actually, once you start putting yourself first, you're better for those other people around you. I always make sure I do something for me every day, even if it's just 5 minutes to turn the laptop off, dance and sing around the kitchen to my favorite song. Sometimes that's all I need. It doesn't have to be anything huge. And don't just sleep with your dreams. Go and wake up and chase them. I've got huge dreams now, and I am going to go and find them. I'm already getting there. I'm not the finished product yet, but I'm certainly getting a lot closer to it. Celebrate your wins. So that was 2 years ago. I'd actually just been diagnosed with cancer in that, and had major surgery to my stomach. I'm fine, by the way, now. I knew that wasn't going to get me. And that was me winning an Inspirational Achievement Award, for everything that I've achieved over the last few years. And that was, I was sat next to Dame Kelly Holmes and Tammy Thompson in that, and that was amazing. And just remember, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have bad days. It's okay to be less than perfect. It's okay to do what's best for you. And it's okay to be yourself. Give up the toxic people in your life. You know, I don't watch the news hardly at all anymore. I surround myself with people that are positive influences in my life. Create a smile file. Love my smile files. Just get a little file on your computer or on your phone, fill it up with nice photos, nice quotes, anything like that. And when you're having a bad day, because we will all get them now and again, just go through it and remind yourself why it's good. And practice affirmations. Every morning, first thing I do is pick out an affirmation. If anyone wants a pack, by the way, I can send them to you. Okay, I designed and printed my own. I should have brought them today. I'm just, had to come a long way. And the final thing I want you to reflect on, as I leave it here, is that the past cannot be changed. Believe in yourself. Things do always get better with time, okay? And that is a big one. Smiles are contagious. Also try and laugh every day if you can as well. Be kind to yourself. You only fail if you quit. And when I wrote this, I saw a post that Steve had put on LinkedIn, actually. Ask yourself, is it okay to not be okay? And I think you did something similar, because I don't like that phrase necessarily. It's okay to not be okay. Maybe it is for one day, maybe it is for two. But when it becomes 30 bad days, 100 bad days, 365 bad days, no, that's not okay. And that's when you need to get some help. And I wish I'd done that, and I didn't. And it took me 6 years to start picking myself back up. And I've got those coping skills now. We're all different. We all have different coping skills. Just talk. That is the biggest thing. And I'm going to leave you there. Thank you very much, everyone.